Globalization is the lifeblood of the aerospace industry. U.S. aerospace and defense exports reached $146 billion last year, generating a hefty trade surplus of about $90 billion, which supported many thousands of jobs. China alone takes delivery of about a quarter of the commercial airplanes that Boeing produces. Airbus may be considered European, but it spends billions of dollars annually with U.S. suppliers and now assembles A320 family aircraft in Alabama. Embraer's E2 jets are made in Brazil, but sport a large amount of U.S.-made content, from engines to avionics. Embraer's Phenom business jets are now assembled in Florida. Indeed, the aviation parts industry is characterized by demand for instant order fulfillment. But how can you guarantee that a customer on the other side of the world will pay their bill on time? What if the customer goes bankrupt? And do you have the cash flow needed to take on new business abroad? Joining us to answer those questions are Zahir Faruqui and John Breslin. Zahir is co-founder and president of Aventure Aviation and has more than 35 years of experience in the industry, including jobs in the engineering and maintenance departments of several international airlines. John joined the Export-Import Bank of the United States, widely known as EXIM, in 2012 as director of its Seattle offices. He was previously president and CEO of the Export Finance Assistance Center of Washington.
Good afternoon, or good morning, good evening, wherever you folks are. This is Zahir Faruqui, and it's my pleasure to share this afternoon with you and tell you a little bit more about how we have been successful and worry-free exporting is what we do. So let me share a little bit about Aventure Aviation, the company that I work for. We've been in existence since 2002. We're located near Atlanta's major international airport, Hartsfield-Jackson, which, as most of you know, is the world's busiest airport, and it allows us to export every day up to 10 o'clock. And it's a great location for us to be right here. We are a highly experienced aircraft parts supplier. We buy and sell surplus inventories from airlines and also purchase retired aircraft, which we dismantle them for spares, refurbish the parts, and resell them. We are ASA 100 accredited, which is the Aviation Suppliers Association certification. And what that means is that we meet the standards set out by FAA to qualify as a part supplier. So we do meet those requirements. Our personal background in this company has been very successful. We've been the SBA's Exporter of the Year, not only for the state of Georgia, but for the entire Southeast region. And we've been on Inc. magazine's list of fastest growing private companies 4 years in a row. Our company focus has been not only on the domestic market, but more on the international side. And we've been very successful overseas. Currently, about 83% of our total sales are derived from international customers. And they're not in one particular region. They're spread all over. And currently, we have over 40 countries that we export to. We regularly participate in trade shows overseas. Again, these are focused trade shows that we go to where we are confident that we would have some business leads. We currently have offices in Toronto, in Dubai, and in Istanbul. And in certain parts of the world, we have local independent reps and agents who help maintain that customer relationship. The pictures that you're seeing right now is a part of our warehouse and our reception area of our company. The typical export products that we sell are aviation parts, commercial and military aircraft parts. But on the military side, this is not covered here. We're going to only talk about commercial aircraft parts. And it could be small widgets to all the way to an APU or even bigger parts. Let me again clarify that Aventure Aviation is not a manufacturer. We supply parts from our inventory. And if parts are not in stock, we broker from other sources, and some of you are probably on the line listening, and we thank you for the business that you send our way. The challenge we have is once a product leaves the United States, it's almost impossible to recall it. And if it's delivered overseas to a customer, that can be a big challenge to get paid if, for any reason, they delay payments or file for bankruptcy. As some of you know, that once you ship a product overseas, it has to go through certain customs regulations, etc. And if they've already gone past that, now you're talking about re-exporting it, and that is usually not easy. So if a product leaves the United States, it's gone. Let me share an example with you. In around 2007, this is when we were not involved with Exempt, we had a case where an overseas customer filed for bankruptcy. And right up to the moment of filing the bankruptcy, even the buyer did not know the health of the company. Our product was already utilized, and there was no way we could get our product back or the money. And you can imagine there was a lot of sleepless nights experience. And it's a loss if that happens to you. The challenges are very unique in the aviation industry. If an airline requires a part, they must have it immediately to avoid delays. And we all know what that means. If an aircraft is on the ground, an AOG, you have to deliver the part right away. And due to that urgency, there is absolutely no time to issue a letter of credit. The airline buyers, most of them don't have the luxury of paying with a company credit card at the time of sale. So it is expected that suppliers like us or shops will accept payment terms of 30 days minimum. And if you can imagine the freight and logistics issues, now you're sending the part overseas. It's going to take a couple of days to get there, clear customs, etc. And quite often the customer is not ready to pay you until he has been able to touch and feel the product and make sure all the documents are correct. So payments could be likely 60 days after the shipment date. In the aviation world, the challenge is to get the parts immediately, and that could be any time of the day. There is no set clock. It's 7 days, 24 hours, 365, no holidays. If a customer needs it, you've got to deliver it. The use of Exempt that we have managed to use is to help us extend the payment terms to our overseas customers. And more important, protect us against the unknown credit risk. The case I just mentioned, like the bankruptcy. If a customer goes bankrupt, now you're stuck. Because if you don't have any coverage, that's really is going to hurt you, because that money is from your profit margins. Protection against slow payments in major sales. The special credit lines for larger customers. The working capital insurance for trade or bank credit lines. In our case, for example, we have a credit line from a local institution, and they require us to have insurance. Because if a product is sold, if the product is going overseas, they want to be assured that they will get paid. So we do need that credit line and the insurance. And the nice thing about it is that you pay the premium on a monthly basis on the reported insured sales. Let me share another example of with Exempt that has been successful for us. A few months ago, an airline that we were doing business with overseas, they abruptly ceased operation, advising us with a nice letter saying that they were going to go and reorganize, and until that time, there would be no payments coming through. And the airline owes us approximately $15,000. However, we are covered under the Exempt policy, so we are sure that at least 90% of that would be paid through Exempt, and we are covered by that side. Another case, for example, is a company in Denmark that we are exporting to. Through the help of Exempt, we have managed to increase our business with this company in Denmark. And since May of 2014, we have done over $500,000 worth of business and are still doing business with them. In both cases, we would not be so aggressive in selling to our international clients, especially after that one experience we had back in 2007 where we got burnt when the customer went under. With Exempt, that gives us the guarantee and the assurance that we can go ahead and export. The inspiration for small businesses, it's impossible to live without failing at something, unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default. A great quotation. Advice for the small businesses. Quite often my friends ask me in doing exporting and why we should be exporting. So let me share some of the questions that I've come across. Do you want to have access to more consumers? This is a typical question. This may require reaching out to new markets. And are you and your organization prepared to step out of your comfort zone? This is most critical. If you're not ready to export, if not everyone in your company is on board for exporting, that will be a recipe to failure. But exporting is the way to go. Is it worth to chase new business overseas? Of course, that depends upon your products and services. But let's assume that if your current market has reached a peak or there's too much competition in the domestic scene, maybe it is time for you to venture out and look for new markets to grow your business. What are some of the pitfalls of exporting? Reaching out to sources who can guide you. It's so very important that if somebody has exported or somebody who can guide you, maybe it's another supplier who's been successful in a certain part of the world, use their help. Get some guidance. In our case, we have used, when we first started out with the Georgia Department of Economic Development, they give free advice. And, it's basically your tax dollars at work, so use them. But again, to emphasize, use your resources that are available to you locally before you start venturing out, because it is expensive to go abroad. And do your homework, find out who your targets are, who your competitors are, and your unique selling proposition. What's your USP? And once you have done all that, then you are uniquely poised to go abroad and do well. Are you willing to travel and see the world through your own eyes? This is something I strongly recommend. We recommend traveling around for a couple of reasons. Because when you have an initial discussion and you appear to be leading to a possible sale, and the value of the sale has a potential to grow and deliver a decent profit margins, visit the prospective client. This would show to the client your serious interest in doing business with them and for you to see whether they can pay for your products. And I would also like to add that once you are with your client, you not only get to know them better, but you also get to know what the future is going to be like with you and them. They might be able to get to know you well, and then to find out a lot more about the companies that you do business with, and you might find out what their future purchase habits are going to be. Maybe they're going to be switching and buying from Boeing to Airbus or whatever the products are. That can only be discussed when you're right there in front of them, and they get to know you. Assuming a sale is going to happen and you have to extend credit terms, how will your company assure the lending institution that the funds will be paid back? We strongly suggest that you speak to your EXIM rep as soon as possible before the sale. There are EXIM trade finance experts available. Contact them and get to know them, and they can guide you. Can EXIM help with the exports? Yes, they can. They speak to your rep who can guide you on what can be covered by the EXIM guarantees, because these guarantees are on products that are made in the United States or have USA manufactured contents or services. There is a certain percentage of that must be manufactured or supported in the United States before the product can be exported out and be a part of the EXIM. Again, your EXIM trade finance expert would be the best person to inform you of your product, the contents, and if that product can be covered. Over to you, John.
Great. Thank you, Zahir. And again, I appreciate an EXIM Bank client speaking about our services. I think the best salesman for EXIM Bank is a satisfied EXIM Bank customer. And I also want to thank Joe Anselmo at Aviation Week for hosting our webinar. Okay, EXIM Bank, who we are, what we do. We're the official export credit agency of the United States government. EXIM Bank's mission is to support jobs through export. So again, we're supporting American jobs by facilitating the export of U.S. goods and services. And oftentimes when I do a presentation, when I speak about EXIM Bank, I try to preface it like this. The EX in EXIM Bank represents the U.S. exporters that we support exporting U.S.-made goods and services. The IM represents the foreign buyers, the importers of these U.S.-made goods and services. Our agency was founded in 1934 under the FDR administration. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C., And we have 12 regional offices nationwide. And so here works my colleague Susan Kitnar out of the Atlanta Regional Office, who's a great colleague of mine. We are a self-sustaining and independent federal agency of the U.S. government. Self-sustaining means at the end of the year, after we pay our cost of operations and hold money in reserves, we paid back last year to the U.S. Treasury $284 million in surplus. Again, Ex-Im Bank takes $0 subsidy from the federal government. So let's get to the next slide. Here's the second polling question. At the end of the day, the most important part of international trade is getting paid. What is your company's primary international payment method? If you could choose one method of how your company is getting paid, the first one being cash in advance, second one being open account extended credit terms, third being letters of credit, fourth being documentary collections, and the fifth being others. If you could choose a choice, please. And as we can see so far, 45% of the respondents right now indicate they're requiring cash in advance. 27.3 is selling on open account extended credit terms. 18.2 is under letters of credit, and 9% is documentary collection. So again, that provides a framework currently of what the audience is currently working with. Again, let's speak about our 2016 results. Ex-Im Bank supported more than $2.7 billion of exports for U.S. small businesses. Almost 91% of the transactions directly supported U.S. small businesses. 20% of the small business authorizations supported minority-owned and women-owned businesses, which I often work with in the aerospace sector. And again, no company and no deal is too small for Ex-Im Bank. And how Ex-Im Bank makes a difference? The past chairman established a tagline last year of reducing risk and unleashing opportunity. I think the tagline reflects how Ex-Im Bank supports U.S. exporters. Again, when we speak about reducing risk, we're helping the U.S. exporter get paid, reducing risk and getting paid, which I think is a primary concern of all U.S. exporters. And again, the unleashing opportunity speaks to the exporting sales, the growth of opportunity. Again, remember, 95% of your markets are overseas, and 2/3 of the purchasing power in the world are actually in foreign markets. And again, our products fall within mainly four groups around risk protection, working capital, extending credit to foreign buyers, and term financing. I'll speak to the products a little bit later. To qualify for our products in general, exporters must be an operating business selling at least for 1 year, depending upon what product it is. They have to have at least one person working in the business full time, have a positive net worth, have a DUNS number and financial statements or tax returns. Again, let's first speak to our working capital guarantee program. The working capital guarantee program is a program where Ex-Im Bank provides a 90% guarantee of repayment to a lender on export working capital loans to enable them to provide working capital loans. It assists small and medium-sized companies in obtaining working capital to produce or purchase U.S. goods and services for export. The loan allows the bank to support advances of up to 75% against export-related inventory. That means raw materials, work in process, and finished goods, and up to 90% against foreign receivables. The loan proceeds may also be used to collateralize standby letters of credit in the form of bid bonds, performance bonds, or advance payment guarantees. It reduces the collateral requirements down to 25%. And again, a point I want to make in regards to this is indirect exporters can also qualify for working capital guarantee support. An indirect exporter would be a aerospace supplier, somebody who's manufacturing a part that's incorporated into, for example, a Boeing airplane or an Airbus airplane. Again, they can qualify for our working capital guarantee program because, again, they have similar needs. Let me show you a chart which basically shows how the working capital guarantee program allows the lender to loan more and the U.S. exporter to borrow more against an example of $2 million in collateral. So, for example, here you have a company with $1 million worth of collateral in inventory and $1 million worth of collateral in exports receivable. So, for example, in this case, you have raw materials of $200,000, work in process of $200,000 and finished goods of $600,000. With a commercial facility without an Ex-Im Bank guarantee, that would be a conventional line of credit with the bank. In this example, the bank could only loan $340,000 because, again, the advance rates are lower. The advance rates with Ex-Im Bank are raised up to 75%. So, in this example, a total of $750,000 can be loaned against these receivables. Again, the work in process is the most telling one. And in the second case, with the export accounts receivable, where there's an example of another million, for open account receivables, a bank typically will not advance against foreign account receivable. Sometimes a bank would be willing to advance against Canadian receivables, but so long as there isn't too high a concentration. But with the benefit of an Ex-Im Bank guarantee, the lender can advance up to 90% against these foreign receivables. So in this case, with an example of $2 million worth of collateral, a bank with a conventional line of credit could only loan $760,000 against their borrowing base, versus the benefit of having that Ex-Im Bank guarantee. It allows the lender to advance $1.65 million against the $2 million worth of collateral. So again, it allows the U.S. exporter to borrow more with less, again, leveraging into their balance sheet. So that's just one example of Ex-Im Bank support. The second program we want to speak about is our export credit insurance. And again, our export credit insurance really, I refer to it as a major tool in your toolbox. And again, the first benefit to a U.S. exporter obtaining an export credit insurance policy is that it's a risk mitigation tool. The export credit insurance allows U.S. exporters to safely offer extended credit terms to their foreign buyers. The second benefit is that it's a sales and marketing tool. Export credit insurance can help to provide increased sales to existing customers in existing markets. It can open new sales to new customers in those existing foreign markets that a U.S. exporter is selling into, or it can open up new sales to new customers in new markets that a U.S. exporter isn't currently working in. Again, this might not ordinarily happen without the use of export credit insurance product support. The third piece is that it's a financing tool. You can leverage your export credit insurance for your financing needs. You, as a U.S. exporter, can assign payment of your policy proceeds on the insured foreign receivables to your lender. The lender can then add those exporters' foreign receivables into their borrowing base, and the banks can oftentimes lend more capital to the exporter against insured foreign receivables on better financing terms. And the fourth piece is that it allows the U.S. exporter, enables them to make a decision to extend credit to the foreign buyer. So the exporter can submit a foreign buyer's name to Ex-Im Bank, and if Ex-Im Bank can approve the buyer and establish a buyer's credit limit, then the exporter can offer open account extended payment terms secured by export credit insurance. If Ex-Im Bank can't approve the buyer, then that tells the U.S. exporter they can still sell to that foreign buyer, but they're going to want cash in advance terms or letters of credit. So in essence, Ex-Im Bank can help the U.S. exporter make a credit decision on their foreign buyers. Again, the risks that Ex-Im Bank covers are both commercial risk and political risk. And let me speak to that. Insolvency, bankruptcy, protracted default. That means slow payers that Zahir was talking about earlier. Political risk would be any action that a foreign government takes that prohibits your foreign buyer from making payment to you, the U.S. exporter. A word of note, though, is that Ex-Im Bank or the private sector insurers won't pay on an insurance claim if there's a buyer-seller dispute. Until that's been resolved in the courts, Ex-Im Bank won't pay on a claim. We also don't provide contract insurance. We'll cover invoices under a contract if we don't insure the whole contract. So I just want to be clear on that method as well. And again, we basically, for the small business exporter, we've really got three groups of products: the express insurance and small business multi-buyer, which are two multi-buyer policy options. Then we offer single buyer policy coverage. And again, when we speak about the SBA, the small business, what qualifies as a small business, we use SBA size standards as far as the number of employees. For a manufacturer, it's 500. And we also speak with an Ex-Im Bank about how much export you have. So let me drill into that a little bit more. Let's go to the next slide. For the express insurance, for example, that's one of our small business multi-buyer options. We're looking for a company that's new to exporting. They've averaged less than $7.5 million in export credit sales over the last 3 years. They have 10 or less foreign buyers that they're selling to on open account terms. And again, they have less than 5 years of exporting experience. And again, Our small business multi-buyer policy is for small business exporters where they have less than $7.5 million in export credit sales, but they have more than 10 foreign buyers. And then the single buyer policy is for, you can use it for small business exporters or any exporter for that matter, desiring to insure only one foreign buyer at a time. The base coverage under our two multi-buyer policies, the Express and Small Business, is 95% coverage. The single buyer is 90%. And again, discretionary credit limits aren't available under our Express, but they are available under our Small Business multi-buyer, and they're not under our single buyer. Again, there's no deductibles on these, and there's the example, the premium rates. The benefits of the Express and the Small Business multi-buyer policies is that we offer blended rates, so you're going to pay based upon the payment term, not upon the financial strength of the buyer or the location of the buyer. When you go to a single buyer policy, then we're going to look at the foreign buyer, the length of the payment terms, and the country risk as well. And again, as Zahir mentioned, at the end of the month, you report the shipments, the services you provided, the products you've shipped. At the end of the month, you report monthly, and we have pay-as-you-go premiums. The policies for our multi-buyer policies are open for 12 months and are renewable. The single buyer policy, again, the policy is open for 12 months, and again, you can apply for a new policy. We have a claims filing window of 3 to 8 months after the due date. And again, for our policy issuance fee, there's a $500 refundable deposit under a small business multi-buyer policy, an Express policy. And under a single buyer, there's a minimum of $500 for the first policy, and it's waived for renewals and repeat small business customers. And again, under the benefits of the Express insurance is that the U.S. exporter doesn't have to provide foreign buyer credit information. However, when you get to the small business multi-buyer and the single buyer, you have to provide this. Now, I want to speak to Ex-Im Bank has registered brokers who help to deliver our insurance products, and our broker would help a company apply for a policy, submit the buyer's names, and once the buyer credit limits have been approved, at the end, they would teach them at the end of the month to report the shipments and pay the premium. And if, gosh forbid, you had to file a claim, the registered broker would help you with that as well. And again, I didn't speak to this, but in regards to our working capital program, we've got delegated authority lenders, of which there's a few on the teleconference line now at this point, again, who can support you with providing a working capital loan as well. Here's an example of the small business rates. Again, the rates are charged, again, for the small business based upon the length of the credit term, not the buyer type. So again, if you're selling to a private sector buyer in 60 days open account, Ex-Im Bank provides 95% of the gross invoice coverage, and the premium cost is 65 cents per $100 worth of coverage. So if you had a sale for $30,000, Ex-Im Bank, if you didn't get paid, you could claim 3 to 8 months after the due date. Ex-Im Bank would pay you $28,500 on that $30,000 invoice. And again, the cost of coverage on the premium is only $195. And again, I want to mention, if you actually have Ex-Im Bank export credit insurance and have a working capital guarantee loan guaranteed by Ex-Im Bank, then we reduce the insurance premiums by 25%. Also, if you have an SBA export working capital loan as well, we discount the premiums. Again, the insurance is there to protect you, the U.S. exporter. And again, the third solution we have is our medium-term and long-term guarantee programs. And again, what we're doing here is we're protecting the U.S. exporter, again, against foreign buyer non-payment. In this instance, we're providing a guarantee or insurance to a lender to induce them to finance the foreign buyer of U.S. capital goods and related services. The requirement per the OECD is a 15% cash down payment is required from the foreign buyer. The guarantee or the insurance covers the remaining 85% portion of the sale, of which is U.S. content. We can support up to 30% local content and ancillary services can be included. And again, the medium-term repayment terms are generally between 2 to 5 years, exceptionally out to 7 years in the renewable sector, and the medium-term loan amounts are under $10 million. Our long-term repayment terms are generally between 6 to 10 years, exceptionally out to 18 years again in the renewable sector. The long-term loan amounts are generally over $10 million. And again, I do want to preface it at this point, right now, Ex-Im Bank doesn't have a quorum to approve long-term transactions. So at this point, we can't approve long-term transactions. And again, I want to speak about a few of the restrictions we had. Zahir did mention it. A lot of companies in the aerospace sector do both civil and defense exports. Ex-Im Bank can't support the export of military or defense-related products or sales to foreign military, with exceptions in dual use or other examples. We, for example, Ex-Im Bank has supported the export of helicopters to Colombia for drug interdiction purposes. So it can be done on a case-by-case basis. And as Zahir also mentioned, Ex-Im Bank does have U.S. content requirements. Under our working capital program or our short-term export credit insurance programs, we have a 51% U.S. content. The goods have to be 51% U.S. content, and they have to be shipped from the United States to the foreign country. Under our medium-term or long-term programs, they have to be 85% U.S. content. And again, as I mentioned, the shipments must originate from the United States, and we're restricted. We're open for business in about 180 countries. We're closed in some. Ex-Im Bank has a country limitation schedule, which speaks to what countries we're open in, as well as whether we can support short-term, medium, or long-term transactions to either private sector buyers, that's business to business, or public sector buyers, that's business to government. And again, all the transactions can't have any adverse economic impact on the U.S. economy. And we also have a word we invented, the rule of additionality. Basically, we support loans with guarantees or insurance that lenders wouldn't provide without the addition of an Ex-Im Bank guarantee or insurance to support the transaction. So again, we're not competing with the commercial banking sector. We're supporting the commercial banking sector. And again, we have, here's the contact numbers for our regional offices. We have 3 regions, Eastern, Central, and Western. And again, I have about 24 colleagues across the country who are ready, willing, and able to support your companies to export in the aerospace sector in the countries that Ex-Im Bank has opened. And at this point, we're open to questions.
Okay, so on to the Q&A. Thanks, John and Zahir, for some very informative presentations. We're going to move on to our questions, and you should both feel free to weigh in, even if the question is addressed to the other person. If you have something to add to it, please do weigh in. But Zahir, let's start off with a question for you, which is almost challenging the premise of this whole webinar. And the question is exporting a distraction? Would you be better off focusing on growing your own U.S. business more if you did not export?
It's a great question, Joe. No, it's not a distraction for us. I think it's important to look at your own markets and see where is your product going to sell the most. Where can you get out there and find a customer that pays on time, and pays well. In our case, we looked at different markets. Of course, we are still doing business in the United States. We have several customers that we regularly sell to them. But what we found was there were opportunities overseas which were untapped. There were several parts of the world where they were flying American-built aircraft, or even, as you pointed out, Airbus aircraft. They do have U.S. products in the Airbus fleet. So for us, it was logical. We found the market. We were able to penetrate that market by providing a better service. And that's how we've been successful in exports.
Yeah, and Zahir, I'd also like to mention the fact that there's great resources available across the country at both your state's Department of Commerce and your U.S. Commercial Service, your federal commerce, as long as a small business. Each state has a small business development center network. Again, they're great resources to help you do foreign market research, as well as potentially vet foreign buyers, as well as arrange for you to either go out on outbound trade missions or inbound trade missions as well to meet those foreign buyers to establish those relationships.
Okay, and John, a real quick follow-up we had from someone that I think you can answer in 5 seconds. They want to know, is this office only for the aviation industry, Ex-Im?
Is my office particular? No, I work within the small business sector, so I'm not sector restricted. Ex-Im Banks, we have a transportation team that focuses on aircraft exports. That being said, me working out in the field, I work with a lot of companies that are suppliers in the aviation industry, as well as parts brokers, similar to what Zahir does. So again, oftentimes we're the first point of contact, and what we do is we connect U.S. exporters with either lenders for our loan programs, registered brokers for our insurance programs, or back to the various product groups that are headquartered in Washington, D.C.
And back to our Q&As, John, can you tell us about any, particular surprises, good surprises or bad surprises that you've had along the way to exporting?
Well, I think the surprise you have is nowadays with the internet as well as the transportation, how well developed it is you could have exporters anywhere in a state. So again, you look at, the I-5 corridor from pretty much Everett, Washington down to Portland, Oregon. You've got a lot of established exporters located close to the port. But I go to places like certainly into Idaho and into eastern Washington, and there's a large cadre of aircraft suppliers and parts manufacturers there who are part of the supply chain for Boeing as well as Airbus. So again, you don't have to be located in a major port city to do business. I think that's the most important lesson.
Okay. We have a very specific question here from the audience. Would XM finance purchases of inventory purchases would XM finance purchases of inventory before sales occur? For example, purchase aircraft spare parts that would be later marketed to potential airline customers.
Well, generally, it would support the purchase of inventory for immediate sales. It's not going to support the sales for stockpiling inventory, on speculation to hope to sell it later. We want to see turnover in the inventory. And again, like I said, we'd probably want to look at this on a case-by-case basis involving both the lender and each lender that we work with, delegated authority lender, is assigned an underwriter. And again, they're more involved with the minutia in regards to our working capital program. I'm a business development officer, so sometimes I get questions, and instead of giving the wrong answer, I oftentimes defer it to both the lender and our working capital underwriters as well.
Zahir, this question's for you. How did you find your first overseas buyer?
I guess the first buyer that we came across was through contacts, the contacts that we had met at some conference and getting to know them. And I think it's very important, the relationship aspect in developing a customer. If you get to know your customer, you must have a relationship built. And to do that, you need resources. Resources could be some friends of yours in the business, in the aviation business. And if you were to ask them for referral, guess what? Everyone would love to refer you to somebody that they think would benefit. If you've done a good job for them or you've been a good friend, they will refer you to. And that's how we found our first customer. And our customer was overseas. We were able to deliver the product that they were looking for. They were having difficulty with their existing supplier in the United States, and we took on that challenge of not only locating what they were having difficulty with, but making sure that the item was delivered to them. Again, at that time we were not part of EXIM, but that's how we started out.
Okay. We have a question from someone who says they've been in business for 3 years but have not yet turned a profit. Do you have to be profitable to qualify for a loan?
Generally for Exim Bank, yeah, we want to see profitability. I know that they might want to consider looking at the SBA, Office of International Trade. SBA's Export Working Capital Loan Program, you may be able to do that. If you can show projections that your company is going to turn a profit, you might be able to qualify for an SBA guaranteed loan sooner. Exim Bank would prefer to see you in the black before we're willing to provide that loan.
Okay, this questioner wants to know, what if you get a working capital loan for a large order and then the customer decides not to take the product and there's no secondary market for that product?
So in other words, if I understand the question right, you've gotten a loan, you've produced the goods, the order's been canceled, and there's no secondary market. That's where, I always suggest the U.S. exporter trying to get, if the order's canceled, export credit insurance doesn't cover cancellation of a contract. They'd be in a pinch in that. That's where I think, Zahir, maybe you could speak to how you establish relationships with your foreign buyers so you don't get caught in this type scenario. Do you have any recommendations, Zahir, from a U.S. exporter perspective?
Oh, yes, we've had a cancellation or two, but that is extremely rare. I think the reason for the cancellation, the cancellation, you must find out what's the reason for it. Is it just a payment issue, or is it a need that's gone away? Quite often, you may be able to work with them. Maybe it's a payment issue that they need stage payment, or maybe a delayed payment. But if the need has gone away, that's going to be difficult. And if there is no secondary market, as you said, we try and stay away from manufacturing. So for our business, we are only buying products that we have a guarantee that there is going to be an end use for it.
And Zahir, are most of your products standardized and not customized to the extent that you could sell to somebody else if a sale fell through?
That is correct. In the commercial aircraft industry, we are not producing or not selling buyer furnished equipment like a BFE or something that is very, very particular to one airline. Could be like an interior type product just for their cabin interior, or we don't have that kind of a product to sell. We are primarily focusing on aircraft rotables. And those rotables, if it's for a 737, they could be used for majority of the 737. It won't be for like one individual 737 aircraft.
Another point I think at the end of the day is in regards to this question, it's really your foreign buyer due diligence, getting to know that foreign buyer, as Zahir said, going and traveling and meeting with them, understanding their needs, really establishing the relationship. I think that's going to reduce the likelihood of a contract cancellation.
I would agree with you, Joe, on that one. This is Zahir. That due diligence is extremely important, and there are many ways you can do it. Of course, EXIM has offered vetting the customer out by doing the background checks and the credit worthiness of the company. And that really helps you because you can go to a website and find that it's a beautiful company, but are they really as good as their credit? And EXIM does do that for you. They do check the background, and they can quickly come back and tell you that, yes, they would offer the credit or no. And if it's a no, then at least you have done the due diligence and said, well, they've got to pay cash in advance or come up with some other payment method. But you do need to do that.
Yeah, as well as Zahir, the U.S. Commercial Service, with their foreign commercial services colleagues overseas, they can vet your foreign buyers and do a lot of more in-depth research, not only to the financial viability of the company, but also their reputational reputation within the industry as well. So again, they're another great resource. Again, that's for-fee services, what we call the Gold Key, and they've got various variations. But again, that's another great way of doing foreign buyer due diligence as well.
In my company, Aventure Aviation, we have used the Gold Key services, and we found that to be a major asset for our business, especially when we are traveling abroad.
Well, you guys are making my life quite easy because you've answered a couple questions that were on my screen, so that's great. We have several related, very basic questions, which revolve around what is the EXIM application process like? How easy is the application process, and then how long does it take to receive a quote on an EXIM policy?
Well, I mean, typically, like I said, the brokers are going to help the U.S. exporter apply for a policy. Typically what I try to do is I try to speak to the company, determine whether they're going to qualify for EXIM Bank insurance, and then I'll provide them with a list of EXIM Bank registered brokers. And we have a list of all the export registered brokers on our website, as well as the list of activities, so you can denote who are the most active brokers. So obviously you probably want to work with a broker who does a lot of policies because, again, they have a lot of experience. And then once then I do a warm introduction. I typically will do a meeting with the broker or a teleconference call where we're speaking to the U.S. exporter and kind of do the handoff. But again, typically, I mean, if the financial information is available, typically to get a U.S. exporter approved for a policy, a small business multi-bar policy, 10 to 14 business days. Typically, and at the same time you apply for the policy, you can submit up to 3 foreign buyers' names. And it typically takes 3 to 5 business days on a foreign buyer. If they're in a country, if the company's established and they're in a country where they've got some financial transparency, they can be approved in 3 to 5 business days on average.
Zahir, here's one for you. How long does it take to find and vet the right foreign buyer?
You asking me to give away all the secrets, Joe? Okay.
Okay. Not my question. I'm just a messenger.
No. The important thing is a customer wedding can take place a few days to few weeks. It just depends upon where the customer is located and how easy is it to get the trade references. You mentioned about checking with the commercial office, which is located in the U.S. Embassy overseas. They are, again, a big asset. They can tell us a lot more about the customer and if there are any issues. We, sorry to plug you into this, Joe, but we are subscribed to the Aviation Week and get a lot of information out of that publication. And that, again, tells us what challenges some companies are having overseas. And if they are doing well, then definitely we want to do business with them. And the successful companies are always putting out press releases and talking things favorably. And those are definitely the companies that we want to latch on to. So it just depends upon how often do you want to, how much you want to investigate about them. And these days on Google, you can find out a lot more as a starting point.
Yeah. And remember, the people in the foreign embassies and consulates, they're locals. They speak the local language and know the local marketplace, so they're invaluable.
Another very specific question, do you help freight forwarders at all, or just companies that produce a product?
The answer is yes. We actually, within our working capital program, we can support freight forwarders and shipping logistics companies. So yes, it is possible to the extent that you are, providing export services, because again, Ex-Im Bank supports the exports of both goods and services. So if your services support exporting, Ex-Im Bank can look at supporting you through our working capital program.
Does Ex-Im help accommodate payment terms based on milestones that would work in lieu of a requirement of a letter of credit to the customer?
Yeah, and actually that's quite an interesting point. Yeah, I mean, oftentimes when you're doing a build, say an airplane or a boat or something like that, there might be a payment made at the time the order's placed. There might be a time when the drawings are finished, when, at each stages. And again, Ex-Im Bank could definitely support that. Oftentimes, in that type of scenario, oftentimes where the foreign buyer is making progress payments along the way, they want that bid bond, performance bond, or advance payment guarantee. Basically, the monies they've outlaid during the process, a mechanism to get them back. Typically, it's in the form of a standby letter of credit or a guarantee. Basically, if the U.S. exporter doesn't finish performing underneath the contract, they can get their money back. So one of the benefits of our working capital program is that we reduce the collateral requirements. Also being said, under our foreign buyer financing programs, the medium term and long term, it is possible to support progress payments made along the way. And again, the benefits of the medium term and long term program for a U.S. exporter, which I did fail to mention earlier, is that at the time of shipment, the U.S. exporter gets paid and the foreign buyer gets the benefits of the extended payment terms. But if progress payments are being made during the process, Ex-Im Bank can support that as well, and you have to get special approval, but certainly it can be done. And some of the delegated authority lenders we work with are certainly able and willing to do that.
We had a question earlier from an unprofitable business. Here's another question from a new business, a business that's less than 3 years old and has no export history, and they want to know, can we use Ex-Im services?
That's going to be challenging. Typically, we want to see a company with an operating history. We have had circumstances where, say, somebody has industry experience, maybe worked for a former company, is suddenly setting up their own operation. We might be able to get them into the Ex-Im Bank products sooner, but oftentimes, that's a conversation, oftentimes when I meet with a company, I very often meet with the company with my colleague, Lee Gibbs, who's my SBA Office of International Trade colleague here in Seattle. We cover Washington State, Idaho, and Alaska. And we oftentimes meet with them. And, if the SBA's export loan programs are going to pencil out sooner, then I'm pretty agnostic. I want the exporter to get the program support that they have regardless of what agency they work with. Because again, very often SBA may provide a loan where Ex-Im Bank provides the insurance. So again, I'd want to speak to that individual customer, but it is possible. But again, it is challenging. Typically under a multi-buyer insurance, we want to see a company with 3 years in business and 1 year of exporting history. But sometimes if a company's been in business, say, a year and has been exporting, we could maybe get them into a single buyer policy. So, but again, you have to show the fact that you have industry experience, or the fact that maybe you've worked with some consulting arms like, say, the Small Business Development Center network to develop an export business plan. The fact that you're working with, say, a state agency, a State Department of Commerce, a State Department of Ag, or a Regional Agricultural Trade Association, or your U.S. Commercial Service, your federal commerce. I mean, once you show that evidence that you're working with people, Ex-Im Bank is a little bit more, can soften our requirements a little bit. But again, I don't want to promise too much. We want to speak to this on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, well, we are running short on time. Don't have time for a lot more questions. Here's one more. Please explain additionality again.
Okay, this is a good one. Additionality is, why is Ex-Im Bank's guarantee necessary? So essentially, Ex-Im Bank provides guarantees when support of the private sector is unavailable and the export sales supported would not otherwise proceed. So again, the additionality test is a set of questions where we determine the necessary of our involvement. So the first question we ask is why the borrower does not have enough internally generated working capital to support the export sale. Okay, so an example could be a large contract size, expanding sales volume, seasonal cash flow, slow turning receivables, or high levels of work in process and or inventory bonding requirements. The second question we would ask, why are the funds not available from external sources? That is, why can't financing be obtained from other sources such as majority owners or capital markets? Then the third question is why the Ex-Im Bank guarantee is needed for your institution to provide the funding. For example, regulatory or credit policies, issues with the borrower's creditworthiness, or market uncertainty. So again, these are kind of the benchmark tests that Ex-Im Bank uses when we speak about additionality.
Okay, time for one more question. What about doing business with a country like Iran, where there is political instability? Can we still qualify for Ex-Im programs?
That's where you always want to check with Ex-Im Bank's country limitation schedule, the CLS. And again, my recommendation is if you're interested in working with Ex-Im Bank, sign up for our CLS newsletter. We actually just came out with a revised country limitation schedule during this week, actually it was last week. At this point, Ex-Im Bank is not open for business in Iran. Again, where Ex-Im Bank is closed, it's for both political and economic reasons. It's because the President and Congress has told us we're not open. And oftentimes the challenge is oftentimes diplomatic relations open in a country a lot sooner than commercial relations do. So, for example, in the past, President Obama opened up diplomatic relations with Cuba, and I was getting a lot of calls in regards to Ex-Im Bank support for transactions in Cuba. We're not open in Cuba at this point. We're not open in Iran. And again, that being said, when I speak to a company and they want to do business in that country, unfortunately we can't support them. They may be able to go to their banks and get conventional support for working in that country. But my recommendation is, there's lots of good markets. Your local State Department of Commerce and your Federal Department of Commerce, we could certainly help you find other markets to sell into until Ex-Im Bank reopens in that country.
Great. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank everyone that sent in questions, including those whose questions we were not able to get to. We got to as many as we could. I'd also like to thank our two presenters, as well as our sponsor, Ex-Im, for making this webinar possible. An on-demand version of this webcast will be posted on the Aviation Week website within 48 hours and will be available there for 1 year. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day.